My insane mother-in-law is convinced that I am going to divorce my wife and is trying to convince my wife of the same, and I've simply had enough. My wife and I have been together for 8 years and have been trying to have our first child for about 6 months now. We were keeping everything under wraps, but my wife recently had to take leave from her job at the advice of a doctor. This was all related to trying to get pregnant as well as some existing medical conditions. We decided it was time to let our parents know, as keeping my wife's leave under wraps was going to be impossible. My mother-in-law responded to the news by saying that she needed time to process the information. I walked into another room and my mother-in-law called my wife back and made sure I couldn't hear the conversation and proceeded to tell my wife that she has concerns and that she didn't think that we should have a child together. My mother-in-law's concerns were a complete blindside to both my wife as well as myself. My wife graduated approximately 2 years ago, and my father-in-law told me ahead of her graduation party, without my mother-in-law's knowledge mind you, that my father-in-law as well as my mother-in-law were buying us a set of cornhole boards. During the graduation party, I said something about the cornhole boards to my mother, and my mother-in-law realized that I knew about the boards before the party. Instead of asking me how I knew, she went to her husband and asked if he knew how I found out. My father-in-law lied. He denied telling me, and they came up with the insane theory that I must have snooped through their email account when I fixed their computer. This lie has snowballed out of control to the point that my mother-in-law now believes that I am installing tracking devices on my wife's person and vehicle. She also claims that I'm wiretapping her phone and that I am tracing her at her job daily. She told my wife that I'm going to wait until the child is born, divorce my wife, take the child, and use this medically necessary leave to claim my wife is not capable of being a parent. My wife went and talked to her mother in person that night. My mother-in-law would not even allow my father-in-law in the room and said that our opinions matched, claiming that he did not need to be there for the conversation. She told my wife that for the last 2 years, I have shown red flags that needed to be addressed before we considered having a baby. When pressed about if my mother-in-law even believes we should remain married, she refused to answer the question. She went so far as to compare me to her abusive ex-husband, who also just happens to be my wife's biological father, with whom my wife has cut contact with for almost 12 years. My wife and I are furious and incredibly hurt that they have let things get to this point without talking to us. Is there any way to restore this relationship with my wife's parents? If so, what steps should be taken? My wife and her mother have always been close, and they never keep secrets from each other, but this was left festering for so long that I feel it has become insurmountable. My father-in-law has always been scared to anger my mother-in-law and would never come clean about telling me about the cornhole boards at this point, as my wife and I believe it would jeopardize their marriage. What should I do? In my opinion, these people sound crazy. Like the fact that she believes that this guy is actually tracking her at work as well as somehow wiretapping their phones is just completely ridiculous. And it doesn't help that the father-in-law is the person to blame for this entire situation. Like if the mother-in-law was just a pile of gasoline, the father-in-law was the match that lit it. Instead of just owning up to it and being like, yep, I told him about the cornhole boards. It's my fault. I should have done that. He instead let this transform into something that's just absolutely ridiculous. In my opinion, I would cut these people off very quickly from my life. And it sounds like the original poster in this situation is going to be thrown under the bus for the rest of eternity. If I was the original poster, I would sit down with my wife and say, hey, your parents are crazy. I still love you, but I don't want them in our lives. Because in my honest opinion, this will never get better, especially when accusations are being thrown around without any shred of evidence. So yeah, that's my take on this situation, and I really hope you're able to find some relief from these crazy in-laws, because from the sounds of it, I think you're in it for the long haul, and I think they're going to blame you for everything pretty much no matter what. This next one came from the Am I the Jerk podcast subreddit. Check out the links in the description if you'd like to submit your own story. Am I the jerk for cutting off my uncle from my life after he refused to help take care of my grandfather? So first, a little bit of backstory. I live in an Asian country where we had some pretty traditional values, like men are better than women, stuff like that. My family takes care of my grandfather, and we have for over 10 years without a break, because he had a stroke some years back and needs help walking, eating, and showering. My uncle and his wife didn't want to take care of him, so the responsibility fell on my mom, my dad, my brother, and me. A few months ago, my uncle offered to take care of my grandfather for 2 months because he wants his child to get to know my grandfather. We of course say yes and finally take a much-needed vacation. 1 month in, and we get a message from our uncle, and it said that he dropped off my grandfather at our doorstep with his luggage and that we need to come back quickly to take care of him. We were shocked and angry because we were an hour away and couldn't get back fast enough. So we asked him to at least bring him inside our home and to use our spare key under the doormat. He did that begrudgingly, but kept on messaging us about how big of an inconvenience this was. Turns out my uncle got bored of taking care of my grandfather and decided that he didn't want to take care of him anymore store and just dropped him off without notice. And while he was in our house, he stole one of our family heirlooms because he wanted payment for taking care of my grandfather. Keep in mind, our family heirloom is a painting of my great-grandfather, who was a famous painter, and his paintings usually go for a lot of money. And this particular painting was promised to my mom. After all this, we demanded him to bring back the painting, and he said he didn't want to because we were apparently not taking care of it properly and that he would just keep it safe for us. So we went no contact with him, we blocked him on all social medias, and we blocked his phone number. But my grandfather still talks to him daily, and my grandfather says that we were too harsh and that we shouldn't cut off family. Plus, all of our relatives are chiming in and saying that we're the jerks in this situation. So that begs the question, are we the jerks for cutting off my uncle after the way he acted and the things he did? I don't think you're the jerk at all. I think the fact that your uncle dropped off your grandfather at your doorstep all because he got bored of taking care of him is absolutely ridiculous. You don't just get rid of a family member because you're bored of them and you don't want to take care of them. They're not a pet. You can't do that. This is a commitment, and guess what? You're agreeing to take care of them. In fact, the uncle is the one that came to this family saying, hey, I want to take care of my father now. When you say, hey, I want to do this, guess what? You have to do it. The grandfather on this situation is really in need of assistance, and he really needs help. So it's completely insulting and irrational for you to then suddenly turn around and say, nah, I don't want to take care of him. That's not fair for anybody. And on top of all of that, and just how inconsiderate this uncle is, he robbed your family. He stole a family heirloom that did not belong to him, all under the guise that he's going to supposedly keep it safe. And I can guarantee you that that painting's going to be in worse condition under his care than it would have been in your own house. So no, in my opinion, you are not the jerk. I would completely ignore any of the relatives who have nothing to do with this situation because they are just birds chirping on the power line in this situation. They literally have nothing to do with it, so they can stay out of it. And in my opinion, I think you should continue to cut off your uncle because his actions are clearly toxic and he is only thinking about himself. I offered to buy him a drink on our second date, but got stuck with a whole bill instead. Is it okay for me to be upset? I've been talking to this guy every day for several weeks. Conversations have been great. Our first date was really good, and we ended up going out again yesterday. Everything was going so well until the bill came along. I had asked if I could pick the next place that we would go to. We're both foodies. So we went to a place he'd never been to before. It was a little pricey, but he chose it out of a list that I sent him. The restaurants on that list varied from super cheap to kind of expensive. The day before, he had an exciting development at work, and I offered to buy us a round of drinks to celebrate. It's worth noting, I did not offer to pay for the whole menu when I said this. He orders one of the more expensive drinks on the menu, which is totally fine. I was planning on paying for it anyways. The bill comes and they set it near me. I needed to use the restroom, so I set my card down and said if they come back to just give them my card for the drinks. I come back from the restroom and the bill and my card are still sitting there. The waiter comes up and asks if we're going to be using my card to pay. I look at him and he looks at me. No movement or offer to split the bill. It's awkward, so I just go ahead and pay for everything. We did grab drinks afterwards and he paid for what I got, but the whole experience left a bad taste in my mouth. He didn't make a move to kiss me at the end of the night, which was just strange also. I'm torn on how I should feel about this. My immediate reaction was to feel kind of mad and turned off, but part of me feels like because I picked the place, maybe I was supposed to pay for some reason? I'm not sure, but I would love to know someone else's perspective on this. So what do you think? Am I okay to be upset over this? I can see your perspective on this one, but he did pay for the first date, and you didn't really communicate clearly or speak up for yourself at all, so it kind of sounds like this one's on you. I think you probably should have made it a little bit more clear that you're just paying for the drinks and that he's going to be picking up the rest of it, but it sounds like that part of the conversation was either completely missed or not at all communicated. So unfortunately, I think you're just going to have to eat that bill and maybe next time speak up a little bit better about what you want. That way everybody can walk away happy. My brother is gaslighting his wife really badly, and I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. I know gaslighting is a term that gets thrown around a lot lately, so please correct me if I'm not using it right, but I think I am. To start off, I'm a 23-year-old female. My brother is 34 years old, and he's married to a girl who is 21 years old. They have 3 kids together, and he treats her like absolute garbage. And no matter what I say to her, she'll always just make an excuse for it. She'll say things like, oh, he's just tired from work, or whatever. And it reached a point where if I talk too badly about him, she'll get annoyed with me and stop talking to me for a while. Anyway, I recently heard that he cheated on her. The person who told me is a reliable source, so I'm sure he did cheat, but I don't have any solid proof. I still don't know if I should say something to her or not, since I don't have any proof. She's talked to me a few times about things that she's noticed that have been off, especially things that I've told her were red flags and that she should look into. One of the things was his long hours at work. She said she was talking to one of his co-workers' wives and mentioned how hard the longer hours have been. The wife had no idea what she was talking about. Her husband wasn't working any extra hours. I told her that that was weird and she should look into it. She ended up asking my brother and he gave her some BS excuse about how just his department was working late. I pointed out to her that the woman she talked to is in the same department as her husband. She was just like, oh, I'm sure there are smaller inner departments we don't know about. Then she found text messages on his phone, like straight up cheating texts. She confronted him about it, and he said it was one of his coworkers texting his girlfriend from his phone, and yet still she's not catching on. To top it all off, she found a ring in their SUV that he used when his truck was in the shop. He claimed it was mine, that it must have fallen off when I used the car to pick up their kids. She went to return it to me, and I told her that it was not mine. When she asked my brother again, he told her that he didn't mean me, but our other sister or one of her friends. But neither of those people that he mentioned picked up the kids ever, as none of them have their license, and the incidents go on and on. How can I snap her out of it without getting her mad? I really don't have much of a relationship with my brother, to be honest. I do, however, have a relationship with her, because we were both in cheerleading together in high school. What should I do? It's really sad situation because I don't know if there's anything you can do. It sounds like the writing could literally be on the wall or on the phone, and she's still gonna deny it. Like, she passes off all of this toxic behavior without ever confronting him about it, which is just really, really sad. Very obviously, her husband is absolutely using her, and he has manipulated her so much that she doesn't say anything about blatant red flags that are right in front of her face, and that is really, really sad. I could only imagine being in that type of situation, where you're trying to desperately excuse everything your significant other is doing, all to avoid the inevitable reality that they are probably cheating on you, let alone treating you terribly, and for years at that. But unfortunately, I don't know if there's much this original poster can do, other than just saying, hey, I'm here for you and I care about you, because it sounds like this lady does not want to fess up to the fact that her husband is treating her poorly and cheating on her. And if a person doesn't want help with the situation, or in any way wants to face this, then there's really not much you can do about it. My mom called me fat and expects me to apologize to her. My mom and I have always had a strained relationship due to her being absolutely crazy. She's an aggressive narcissist, she's a gaslighter, and she has always favored my younger, substance-addicted, money-thieving brother for God knows what reason. My mom and I did actually have a period of my childhood where she said she would brag to her friends about me. She would tell them that I would get good grades, and that I don't run off with the boys, and I don't get pregnant, I don't do any of these terrible things. I realized a couple of years ago that I don't really remember when she stopped saying those nice things about me. I mean, did she ever? Maybe she was lying then too. Well, little did I know that not only had she stopped saying nice things about me, if she ever did, but she has also been insulting me to our family for years. I didn't find this out until about 2 weeks ago. I got a phone call from my cousin who said she didn't want to keep quiet about something anymore, saying that she had to tell me that my mom was over in my aunt's house in front of the entire family mocking me. She said I'm too sensitive and that I'm self-conscious about my body, and that it's probably because I'm fat, and that she has to choose her words carefully around me because otherwise I might start a fight. Now, just days before this, I had gone to a bridesmaid dress fitting at my mom's place, and the dress was massive on me. Yes, I'm very curvy, but the dress was even bigger. My mom, in half an hour, managed to insult my body, my skin, my hair, and more. I have chronic depression. She knows this, and I spent the next week in a manic depressive spiral, but she simply didn't care. So to get that phone call from my cousin was the last straw. I posted a poem on my socials, which I had no intention of posting before, about how my mom tore me down during one dress fitting. She contacted me soon after and was saying everything was my fault anyway, and demanding that I explain why I would even post the poem in the first place. It has now been 2 weeks of no contact. I've been to 2 family events with her around, and have actually been much calmer and happier without her hanging around, and I think she knows it. Yesterday, while at a carnival with the family, my mom was there again. I didn't say a word, and I enjoyed myself with the other family thoroughly. My cousin told me she overheard my mom saying she's waiting for me to come to her, but I have no intention of doing that anymore. Later, my uncle sat down with me and said my mom feels this is so weird and he doesn't want me to have any regrets, and that he can't imagine me not being at my mom's wedding, who I was going to be a bridesmaid for until things went south. He says this after witnessing my mom making fun of me and calling me fat. He was pretty much asking me to forgive and forget and to move on. I don't know about you, but I've experienced more happiness and growth in the 2 weeks I've cut my mom off than I think I would by forgiving and forgetting the stuff she's done to me for the 100th time. I don't think I will forgive and move on like I always have before. I think instead I'll just move on without her with a smile on my face. Good for this original poster for finally seeing that, hey, I don't need this crazy lady in my life, especially when her mom has been treating her like garbage for years. There's a cliche saying that I've heard somewhere before that says, sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived. And I really like that, and I think that applies guys in this situation. Your mom has put you down, humiliated you, and talked badly about you constantly. There is no reason for you to forgive her for anything. I think maybe eventually you can find yourself in a place where you can let go of the things that have happened, but to be expected to forgive her just so you can keep the peace and have it so her wedding goes off while you're there is not something I would do if I was in your shoes. I absolutely would make it a point, especially at her own wedding, to say, hey, your actions actually have consequences this time. And guess what? It's your own fault. So good for you for finding your voice, and good for you for finding a way to get away from her. Because in my opinion, you're going to be so much better off without her constantly putting you down. My dad is planning on divorcing my mom, and my mom wants me to try and help salvage their marriage as a last resort, and I honestly don't know what to do. The beginning of this is a mess, for me at least. My mom and dad have been married for a long time. I don't know the exact length, but I'd say at least 20 years. On June 19th of this year, they were having a super loud fight. I stayed in my room trying to ignore it by playing a rhythm game, as one does. Then the fighting sort of stopped, but my sister and I were called to the dining room. My mom and dad were at the table, looking distressed. Lots of stuff was said, but the summary was that my dad was tired of fighting and didn't feel like he belonged in our family anymore. He didn't say anything about divorce, but he sure did imply that he wanted one. My sister, who was more aware of this conflict between my parents than I was at the time, snapped at both of them, saying that she was tired of their fights and that all she wanted was for her sister, which is me, as well as herself, to be safe. She told them to go somewhere else if they were going to keep fighting like this, and thankfully they did. My older sister later comforted me because I was confused and upset, but for the rest of the day, we were in our respective rooms trying to cope. My parents came home at around 11 o'clock at night. The fighting died down, to me at least, but I noticed that my parents weren't talking anymore, and my dad was sleeping on the couch instead of their shared room. I've noticed he's also listening to an audiobook called Should I Stay or Should I Go? Fast forward to today. I was in my room minding my own business as usual, and my mom came in very visibly upset. She told me that my dad was planning on divorcing her and selling our house and other properties. She wanted to ask me if I could write him a letter telling him that he should stay and not divorce my mom. This is because I had to write a letter to my parents for my 8th grade graduation, and despite how lazy I was in writing that letter to them, it ended up making them cry. My mom told me that because I'm my father's daughter, he has a soft spot for me and will listen to me. So I told her that I would write the letter. This has single-handedly ruined my day. I already have to deal with regular 14-year-old things, like my current summer school classes, and having an annoying crush, and that's almost too much for me already. I've basically been tasked with mending my parents' relationship. I've told my friends about this, and they've offered me places to stay, as well as their support. But like me, they're all 14, and don't know how to deal with this sort of heavy stuff either. I also can't go to my sister for help right now because she's on an international school trip, and I don't want to ruin her fun by dropping this news on her. It's the summer before her senior year, and I don't want her to be stressed during a time where she's supposed to be having a good time with her friends. And just so you know, my dad is very firm on his decision to divorce my mom. They've tried therapy, they've tried couples counseling, but he said he doesn't want to do that anymore and just wants the divorce. What should I do? I want to make it very clear to anybody listening. If you place it on your kids to try and save your marriage, you are a terrible human being and a terrible parent. That is not the kind of thing you put on your kids' shoulders. I'm sorry, that is just absolutely terrible. I feel so bad for this original poster to be put in a position like that where they are now in a roundabout way responsible for the success or failure of this marriage. Like, that is absolutely horrendous, and I'm so sorry they're dealing with this. If I was in this person's shoes, I would immediately go up to my mom and tell them, this is really uncomfortable for me. There's nothing I can do about it, and I'm really sorry that the marriage fell apart, but this is not on me, this is on you. Then again, saying this to your parent at 14 years old is really hard, and I don't expect it to go that way, but I would definitely express my feelings of discomfort and sadness that my mom is placing this kind of pressure on me. This is such a sad situation, and I genuinely wish the original poster the absolute best in trying to navigate this, because this is just not fair, and it's not fair for your mom to put you in this kind of position with this kind of pressure, all because she can't handle this relationship herself, which, by the way, is not your responsibility. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, use the playlist at the top of the description, and the next time you live stream, use the Cream of the Crop music. Search Cream of the Stream on Spotify or whatever platform you use for copyright-free music to use for your next stream.